Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, comrades, compañeros, welcome back to the Moynihan Report. I'm doing this one from home today. Why am I doing it from home? It's none of your business. It doesn't matter because the only thing that does matter is that I have the greatest guest in history. She's a hard booking, but she's a friend. So my pal, a Fox News contributor, which, by the way, I annoyed everyone on staff by saying, I don't think that's true, and sent like a pissy email about it. It turns out she is again a Fox News contributor, Mary Katherine Ham, who does 750 podcasts, one with Carol Markowitz. You still do the one with Vic Mattis?
Yeah, we're working on finding it a new home. It's on hiatus for summer.
It's
So getting hammered and normally, but we'll bring it back.
yeah, normally and getting hammered. The summer is over, Mary Catherine.
I
So
know. I know.
please take your homeless podcast out of Skid Row in LA and find it a place to live. Mary Catherine's an old pal of mine. And, it's funny because on the other show that I do, The Fifth Column, we were talking about political violence, which is what we're going to talk about today, too. And my co-host, the great, brilliant Matt Welch, does something that he does once a year. And once a year, he brings up a Mary Katherine Ham piece from 2009.
2009. Yeah.
Wow, we are old, Ham.
Hmm.
From the Weekly Standard. We're so old that the Weekly Standard existed back
Yep.
then. That was about the idea of political violence at Tea Party rallies. I
Yeah.
kind of want to start there because I have a little bit of a rant I could go on, but I want to get you in here right away about the kind of background and history of political violence in America, and when it's acceptable and when people allow it to be acceptable, and then other times when people say it's existing and it's not really. And the one that I mentioned today, I was on Megyn Kelly's show today, and I brought up again the Jared Loughner shooting of Gabby Giffords, and this was somebody who was mumbling about numerology and grammar, and that was made by Paul Krugman and a number of other people into some sort of Sarah Palin inspired hit, which is so, by the way, it's such an old and long story that those legal cases of Sarah Palin, suing the New York Times are still wending their way through the court system
Yep.
as of last year. So, Mary Catherine, thanks for being here. Number one, obviously, and number two, revisit that piece, and I'm sure you could probably understand why Matt thought it was necessary to revisit that piece now.
Yeah, so I wrote this piece in 2009, and I was feeling, as I am fairly frequently when something happens, feeling a little gaslit. I don't think we used that term back then necessarily, about what was happening in August of 2009. In August of 2009, as Obamacare was the big discussion, there were some 500 plus town halls all over the United States of America wherein constituents came to talk or yell at their representatives about Obamacare. Many of them were conservative, many of them were Tea Party activists.
Mhm.
And the impression that the media gave of these gatherings was that we were on the brink of absolute destruction of the Republic because these conservatives were occasionally raising their voices at these town hall meetings. And there were various like slight kerfuffles. There were a couple that leaned over into actual assault.
Yeah.
And I went through all of the public reports and all the police reports that I could find of any actual physical altercation at any of these town halls and found, I believe the number in the end was, of the 500 plus gatherings, they
Mhm.
were indeed mostly peaceful, it turns out. Of the of the
Yeah.
500 plus gatherings where people were expressing themselves to their representatives, there were 11 physical encounters. And now some of these were just like ripping a poster out of someone's
Yeah.
hand or putting a hand on someone. And they were 8 of 11 liberal on conservative. And that was the opposite of the impression
Yeah.
that press coverage gave. And I felt that it was very unfair to people who were simply asking for their concerns to be heard,
Mhm.
who were often not engaging in any of this and were being, in many cases, attacked by
Mhm.
people from the other side who were mad at them for voicing their opinions. So I got my hyper focus on occasionally. It doesn't happen that often, and figured out how many of these incidents actually happened. And it turned out these
Yeah.
these healthcare terrorists are going to ruin the country just wasn't a real thing.
She swallowed 1,000 milligrams of Adderall and decided to do some reporting, like some
It happens
actual
every now and then.
proper reporting. People do that. Well, it's an easy transition to one of the things I want to talk about, which is reporting and is the media's reaction to this. The Jared Loughner thing stuck in my head because it was right around the time, about, I think it was about a month before my daughter was born. And I remember sitting despondent reading this stuff, thinking, what is wrong with these people? They're trying to gin up this, political assassination where none existed. There was somebody who had some, rather serious mental health issues. What we saw this time is a bunch of things, but we also saw people trying to gin up a right-wing assassin. We can expect it from people that seem unbalanced, like Keith Olbermann, who was tweeting all weekend about how he was a groyper. And I love seeing all these people who have discovered the word groyper. They're now saying, oh, he's very much a groyper. I just got an email from some psychotic listener. Sorry, you're not all great. There's a couple of you that are bad. Who was like, yo, you see the stuff that they're releasing now? You see how you were wrong? That you've said he was like a left. And I'm looking at this stuff and I was like, no. All the stuff released today seems to kind of prove my point. But anyway, so we've seen a lot of this stuff. And particularly over the weekend, there was a big push to get people to acknowledge something that wasn't true, was that this murderer, and I shan't say his name, was a right winger. And he was mad that Charlie Kirk wasn't more right wing. And this infiltrated my life in one way. A friend of a friend said, oh, I heard he was a groyper. And I said, oh, where did you hear that? Text chain. I said, read me the text. Reads the text. I said, ask this group text where this came from. And it turned out it came from the #1 Substacker on earth, Heather Cox Richardson. Is that her full name? Who is some sort of professor and some sort of crackpot too. And at the same time, I'll leave you with one other thing that I think you'll probably know a little something about too, is the execrable Karen Attiah, formerly of the Washington Post, tweeted a quote unquote quote. You see how I did that? There's multiple quotes in there from Charlie Kirk that was the response from very rational and sane people like George Conway, who say, this is just a quote. What is you're firing her for something that Charlie Kirk said, and that was not, in fact, the case.
It's not true.
It was not true at all. So, what do you make as I kind of ramble in anger about this really terrible media coverage that we've seen? What do you make of the general media coverage of the Kirk assassination?
Yeah, I think in the aftermath of these things, I always want to be very careful because I'm a public figure and I don't necessarily have access to primary reporting or leaked investigative details here. So I always want to be very careful for at least 24 hours, 48 hours. And yet I do think there was a cultural shift after the Loughner shooting of Gabby Giffords, where it felt very much like, and I was surprised by it. I remember I was working at the Daily Caller at the time, which is a right-leaning publication. I was in charge of the front page, so I kept updating and covering the press conference and trying to add details. It was a very hard day because it was a tragic event. And then I realized halfway through the day, oh my gosh, like they're saying that it's Palin's fault,
Yes.
That's the way we're going here. And I felt like that was new, that this sort of thing would be ginned up so quickly. So I think there's a sort of run to your corners need for everyone to like pin it on someone as soon as the news happens. And I think the hope is often, unfortunately, because it's the opposite of journalism, I think the hope is that the first story sticks.
Yeah.
And in this case, the Groyper story stuck, at least for this interim period of time. And the first thing that some people hear will be that. And it is a disservice to them if they believe that for any period of time. But I think there is this defensive need for everybody to go, well, it's them, it's them, it's them.
Yeah.
And if you fill the gap with something fake, that something fake might stick around. And that's not real news.
Yeah. And I see it, by the way. It's very stubborn, this one.
Yeah.
It is sticking around. And, the other ultimate problem with it, beyond it not being true, is that it gives a lot of attention to Nick Fuentes, who's
Yes.
getting, drudge hits and everything, where he sounds like a reasonable person here. He is, in fact, a white supremacist, so he is not a reasonable person in any way. But I think that there's something important to point out here, and it's being underlooked, is that while everyone's kind of coming out with these scorecards, how many people of the right attacked? How many people of the left attacked? This is a very big country, and you're going to get people on both sides of the aisle that do that. I think the better question and the better thing to look at is institutionally
Yeah.
the reaction to these bits of violence. And I am, done playing games on this one. And as I said today to Megyn Kelly, I'm tired of being ecumenical about it, is that if you look down the list of people that have committed terrorist offenses in this country for political reasons and have gone to jail for them or have been arrested and acquitted by the skin of their teeth, and you see the number of them that ended up teaching children at universities,
Hmm.
is absolutely appalling. You cannot say when you're okay with Bernadine Dorn at Northwestern and Bill Ayers at University of Illinois and Eleanor Stein, Raskin Stein at SUNY Albany, and Susan Rosenberg was at John Jay College, and Judith Clark was at CUNY, and Kathy Boudin was at NYU Law School and Columbia, and Jamal Josephs was at Columbia University. These are people that took part in some pretty heinous things, and I think almost everybody that I mentioned was either arrested or went to jail. Almost all of them went to jail. I could keep going. The list is very, very long.
Yeah.
And when you have Mumia Abu Jamal, a cop killer who shot a cop named Danny Ferguson, everyone forgets him, but they remember Mumia Abu Jamal, and is still in prison. He was taken off death row. But when Brown University gets his cache of papers, and keeping in mind that Mumia Abu Jamal was convicted of this killing and so clearly was the culprit that Michael Moore even said in his book, we got to admit on the left that Mumia Abu Jamal did it.
Did
He
it.
actually said that. That's how bad it was. I mean, he was there with a gun in his hand and a spent shell casing and a dead officer next to him who managed to shoot him too. But Brown University does this, and then they have this, exhibit in the library in which and I noted this down, and then I'll shut up, that Mumia Abu Jamal, this is the exhibit they had of his new stuff, is a poet, writer, musician, scholar, historian, archivist, public radio producer, journalist, painter, and a public intellectual. He's also a murderer. He
Yeah.
is a convicted murderer. And so why would we expect those people who, will shrug off Charlie Kirk's assassination to do anything differently? We've been doing this for a very long time in this country.
Yeah, I'm with you that it does, and I wish to be straightforward about it. Like, these people are elevated. And
Yes.
it always bothered me during the Obama years that the association with heirs was treated as some sort of like icky. Why would you bring that up? You're the problem. You're trying to tarnish this great man. And I was like, I don't know. He felt like he tarnished himself if he hung out with the terrorist, right? But
Yeah.
the terrorist was elevated to such a degree that this person is in polite society. And I think it's a real problem. And there's this thing too where like you see the museum exhibit where it's like, oh, he's a poet, and it just leaves out this important information. But they sort of try to have it both ways, because the preaching from said poet is also violent revolution is good and
Correct.
necessary,
Yeah.
right? So like many people on the
Yeah.
left who cheer this or who justify it will say in one breath, oh, we're not those people at all. And then in the next breath, also violent revolution is good and necessary.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
Look, if you see somebody at January 6th or any of these kind of MAGA type things that go pear-shaped or get violent or whatever, and you're always going to see somebody with a Pinochet t-shirt on, one person, right, with a Pinochet t-shirt on. It's the helicopter because Pinochet defeated the people on the left by, a coup, and then by murdering his opposition by pushing them out of helicopters, killing them in soccer stadiums, et cetera. I think you can do all the good stuff that you can do with the economy without killing your opponent. Seems like it'd be a pretty basic thing. But when that happens, I always hear about it.
Right.
That's why I know about it. Somebody posts it and say, "Can you believe these psychos?" Whereas I walk down the street in this city and there's people hanging Cuban flags and Castro t-shirts, Che Guevara t-shirts, murderers, every one of them. But provided they're doing it for the correct political ends, we seem to think it's okay. And so why would we ever be shocked that people seem to think that the killing of Charlie Kirk is not either okay, that's a smaller segment of people, but understandable. And
Understandable, yes.
he was doing some, he was involved in some bad speech too.
Yeah, I wish I was more surprised. I think the
Yeah.
Luigi Mangione uh, reaction after he brutally murdered Brian Thompson, also a father of two, for the crime of having a job that Luigi Mangione didn't like. Uh, I think the celebration of that guy sort of prepared me for this.
Yeah, that's
Um,
right. Yeah.
and so once it started, I was appalled, but thought, okay, well, we had sort of a dry run on
Yeah.
this, where people have built themselves a world in which they have really expanded the world of targets for themselves when it comes to political violence, to
Yeah.
a guy who's a healthcare CEO, a guy who's a pundit who talks on college campuses. By the way, one of the conversations that I have had to have this week is explaining to my kids what happened while also telling them I'm going to college campuses to speak and do
Yeah.
exactly what Charlie does, except on a much smaller scale, obviously. But I love that work. That work is important. Engaging with people who disagree with me has always been something I enjoy doing.
Yeah.
But it is it's disturbing to see so many people think that it's sort of like, it's okay. That how like I get it. I get where he was coming from. I don't
Yeah.
That makes me very uncomfortable as somebody who does this for a living.
I just don't think you can have any conversation, and I think anybody, myself included, who engages in this, and I have, unfortunately, conversation about individual quotes and things like that, right? So, did Charlie Kirk say X, Y, or Z? When he was 12 years old, when he was 20 years old, when he was 25.
Yeah.
I think that kind of misses the point because when you're talking about that and saying this is particularly bad, what he said about affirmative action, this is the kind of quote that's being abused all over the internet. Would I have said it that way? No, I
Right.
wouldn't have. But is it a sentiment that is held by many, 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 many people and a perfectly defensible one? Yes, that's also true. But when you are doing this, when you are trying to find individual statements of somebody who's on the radio constantly over years, right? You're going to say some things that are screwed up. And I hope that if such a tragedy would befall either of us, that offense archaeology would start almost immediately. What
Oh
did they
yeah.
say and when? And they would find stuff, of course, because we all say dumb things in our life. And it's something I've also said today is that none of this allows for political evolution.
Yes.
What Charlie Kirk thought when he was 18, when he started in this business, might not be something that he thought when he was 31, but he's not allowed to clarify that because he's been murdered. And to
Mhm.
take that stuff out and use it as some sort of cudgel to beat him with, the premise of it offends me. That
Right.
if we find the stuff that's bad enough, it mitigates the crime in
It'll
some
make
way.
sense, right?
Yeah, correct.
It'll be okay. I think too. I think Charlie had a gift for um, being, I think, at his best with his adversaries,
Yeah.
even better than with his allies. Like he was at, and I a thing that I didn't realize about him, and I think I sort of shorthanded him in my brain a little too much as so and so destroys so and
Yeah,
so
yeah, yeah,
clip guy.
yeah,
And I had known him over the years. We were not close, but he was always lovely to work with, and had me at turning point events when we disagreed on issues. And I think I had thought of him as a good debater. He's a generous debater. Like if you click through on those quotes and you watch the entire exchange, you will find somebody who is allowing for political evolution for the person across from them, who is
yeah.
in some cases for a nervous person restating that person's argument for them
Mhm.
to help them to have a real back and forth. And so I think I it's a good lesson for me not to shorthand other pundits too quickly in my head, and lest I miss the full context and actually appreciate the really it's a tough thing to do that work. And he did it quite well often.
It's an extremely hard thing to do. And I think that, people, I got a bunch of text messages and DMs, mostly DMs, and emails today from being on Megan's show. And 50% of them said, uh, you're a genocide denying Zionist sleazebag. And then the other 50% were like, why do you allow her to say that about Israel? Push back. You didn't push back hard enough. It's like one of the things that I want to respond is you guys don't know how hard this is to do. Particularly when you're across
Right.
with somebody you have a lot of respect for and you've known for a long time and you like and you want to be generous to them and kind of hear them out too, is that to people in the peanut gallery, they're just like, well, why didn't you destroy her? You
Yeah.
should have destroyed her. And it's also funny when they say that and you're sitting across from someone. And I'm like, do you know what that's like to destroy someone? And they're like, all right,
Yeah.
we're wrapped now. Do you want to go get a coffee or something? Is that what he was doing? And I was not a follower of his stuff. I mean, it was just the kind of internet interaction, except for one actual interaction one time in my life. And, from people I who knew him, and I hate doing that tense change, but I know that you did, Mary Catherine, to what degree, I don't know, but you knew him. It takes a lot to be that graceful in a debate.
Yes.
Debating is hard. Doing it is hard. Doing it well is hard. And when it
Caring
says
for it is hard. It's
preparing for it is hard. When it says change my mind, this kind of thing, I don't think people often realize that what Charlie Kirk was trying to do was change other people's minds.
yeah.
He'd been thinking about it
Well,
all the time, and
and
he
I
was like, "You
was
changed my mind," but I'm
I
going
was
to try to
thinking
change
it through
yours too.
because the prove me wrong is sort of like the snappy motto.
Yeah,
But underlying prove me wrong is a really important sort of humble statement and realization that all people who engage in debate should have, and that I think too many on the left have just dispensed with, which is I could be wrong.
yes,
I could
yeah,
be wrong. And
yeah,
I am asking you to explain to me how that would go, right? Now, of course, he had great confidence in his positions, but just allowing for that, prove me wrong, implies I could be wrong, go for it.
yeah,
I think you get so little of that on college campuses these days. There is a truth with a capital T. Too often, too many people have just been told it's decided. And
mhm.
that, by the way, precludes all evolution as well, because you can't kick around ideas when there's capital T truth, right?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah,
And that if you don't speak capital T truth in the exact specific ways, that you are actually physically dangerous. That's one thing I think Greg Lukianoff has been saying. We must dispense entirely with the idea that words are violence. They're just not.
they're not
It's
violent.
not. They're not an existential threat to you. It turns out Charlie's words weren't an existential threat. He faced one.
He did, and I mean, this is it's an incredibly sort of morally bankrupt mind that would even entertain the idea that taking somebody off the scene, whether that's silencing them by putting them on an island or cutting their internet connection, to think that there's one person that holds these views and then propagates them and convinces other people because there's some sort of magician at this stuff, and not that they're views that are held by an enormous majority in often cases
Yeah.
of this country. I mean, the trans sports stuff, which is a, 80-20 issue, was in the past 4 or 5, 6, 7, 8 years, whatever time frame you want to put it at, something that would be destructive to your career, depending on who you were, where you worked, where you lived.
Yeah.
And it was inadvisable to discuss this issue that almost everybody agreed with you on. So, I mean, the idea of, Charlie, he's the source, according to this scumbag murderer. He had so much hate. Imagine this. He had so much hate that I had to kill him in front of his family.
It's just
It's
beyond.
That's the world we live in. And during my day today, looked down at my phone, and I was probably, half a mile from this. The judge in the Luigi Mangione trial got rid of one of these state terrorism charges, which
Right.
seems like the type of thing I would probably agree with, depending on, the kind of refinements of it. But it seemed like it was maybe a reasonable thing to do. But it elicited crowds of people out in front to cheer, which makes you wonder, wait a second, there are crowds of people out in front of the courthouse on an average day of the Luigi Mangione trial? What kind of disgusting, horrible, kind of morally perverted world are we living in? It's what I mean. We saw it with Salman Rushdie. well, he shouldn't have written that stuff.
Yeah.
Probably deserved it. There was a piece in the New York Times yesterday about Cat Stevens, and this is one of the most remarkable things I've ever seen. The revivification of Cat Stevens' career. Cat Stevens is
Right.
now named Yusuf Islam, and during the Rushdie affair, he said some pretty horrible things. The New York Times described them as, I can't remember what the phrasing
They
was.
they use the word
Clumsy,
his
clumsy,
clumsy. Yeah.
clumsy.
Yeah.
Are you motherfuckers kidding me? I'm sorry. Can I swear on this show? It's my
I think
show.
you
Are you
can.
motherfuckers kidding me?
Yeah.
Clumsy was, by the way, asked if he minded that in Bradford, in England, they were burning Russian effigy, and he said, "No, I prefer it was the real thing." And then
Clumsy.
went on further to say, if I had the coordinates of where he was, I would give them to the bearded psychopaths in Tehran and make sure that he was rendered impotent as a writer and as a human and killed. That was referred to as clumsy in a glowing profile of somebody that I would be okay if a glowing profile if he had revisited that and he said he was sorry and said it was
Right,
all a
right.
big mistake. But that's not what happened.
No, I do. I think there's a real pro-murder constituency when it comes to
Yeah,
political violence, and
yeah,
I I am willing to stipulate and thank nationally elected Democrats for not being the people who are like, well, there was like a little bit of squishiness, but it's none of the like this is great, right?
correct. Yeah, that's true. Yeah,
But then you see, like, with your own eyeballs, nurses and therapists and accountants and doctors and teachers reveling in this, and that really does cross a bright line. Like
it
I do
does.
like, I know we're always going to have some crazies out there who like Luigi Mangione because he's cute, right? I know we're going to have that, but it should be kept to a minimum. Like the number of people, and we should shame it openly.
I
Uh,
think so too.
that
Yeah.
these people think this is hunky dory.
What do you
I
think,
also think,
Mary Catherine? I just want to interrupt you for a second. What do you think about the idea that what's happening now with some of these people and some of the gross things they're saying is a version of kind of right-wing cancel culture?
yeah. So I have been thinking through that because I wrote a book about cancel culture before
You
it had
did.
a name. It was called End of Discussion in 2015. Unfortunately, it is more relevant now than it was then.
Way ahead of the curve, you and Guy Benson. Way ahead
So
of the curve.
So I've been thinking about it because, like, I don't love one thing, a couple things I don't love about cancel culture is like sort of the systematic nature of it. Like, we're going to dig up every single example we possibly can,
Yeah.
right? It's very aggressive. It can be very disproportionate. Um, However, I do think when it comes to applauding political murder, that is something as a society that we will lose the society if we don't have a basic understanding that that is bad. And how do you tell people that's bad if there's no social disapprobation for it,
Yeah.
and no consequence for it? There's also the problem that I said, I said it might be helpful to think about it like before there was cancel culture, could you get fired for this thing? So in the instance of that poor California truck driver who put an OK symbol out his window,
Oh, yeah.
and someone took a picture of it, that's not a real thing. You couldn't have been canceled for that before the internet and before cancel culture. However, if you're a pediatrician in your little town and you would put up posters all over town on telephone poles that said Hinckley should have shot better, I don't think that would go well for you.
Probably not.
Like that might just be a normal thing that people get fired for. I do
Yeah.
think people should be allowed to be jerks about Charlie Kirk and to state as much as with enthusiasm even how much they disagreed with him. I don't want those people to lose their jobs. They're being kind of jerky sometimes, but the actual advocacy for murder is going to be a problem for me, particularly if you're a nurse or a teacher who's in charge of kids, who's in charge of my health. I That's going to be an issue for me. And also, one more thing. Matthew Dowd and Karen Attiah being repeatedly very bad at their jobs for many years is not cancel culture.
Yes. Yes. I mean, the thing about the Matthew Dad thing that surprised me most is I found out that he was married to Maria Shriver. Is that
Yeah.
true? That was a shock to me. And then I listened to his comment and I was like, oh, I forgot why I really didn't like this guy. The
Yeah.
worst part of Matthew Dowd's commentary was his initial speculation that it might have been Yosemite Sam in the
Oh,
crowd
yes.
shooting a gun off in celebration because that's what these people do. Is it shows you how disconnected Matthew Dowd is from. I mean, you're married to Maria Shriver. I mean, in the Kennedy orbit and the
Well, and
Schwarzenegger orbit. You're
Dowd
not
is
really
Dowd
understanding.
is actually a good example of the sort of building this mental fortress where you can't let the facts be the facts, where you can't
Yeah,
acknowledge some of these problems on the left. And I know he used to be a Republican, but like, let's be serious. He blocks anyone who disagrees with him in even the most kind way. He's done it to everyone.
yeah.
I encourage anybody who's, on X, just go check Matthew Dowd. He's probably blocked you. Um, but he doesn't engage with those ideas, and so he therefore cannot let go of the thing that he's built in his head within an hour of this shooting.
Yeah.
And that's just like that type of thinking or non-thinking is very damaging to everyone. And like we don't have to have you being the guy leading the charge.
It's also damaging to MSNBC, and I understand why they fired him. I mean,
Yeah.
if you fire somebody where your job is to give opinions, and you gave in the most inopportune time the
In
worst
breaking
possible
news
opinion,
situation, yeah.
breaking news situation, you can't manage that. Maybe you shouldn't be in the opinion mongering business, and maybe that's why. But I think that to your point, and you point this out back in the day in your 2015 book, good Lord, that was a long time ago, where we were talking about people getting canceled for things that were pretty anodyne
Right.
and not things that were like, oh, he should have expected to get murdered. He brought this upon himself. Now, in normal situations, if somebody says that in the break room,
Right.
at Target or something, I'm not like, oh, let's get rid of them. I do not like this instinct to go around trying to get everyone fired. But if you're posting things publicly, by the way, that's your own fault. Because if you're that stupid that you think that even if your profile is hidden, that it's private, it is not private. If you show someone a photograph and they you hand it to them and they might show it to somebody else, right? Assume that anything you do on the internet is going to be public. So there's a lot of stupidity in there, and it thins out the herd of dumb people and companies because they're doing things. But this is not the same thing as a 15-year-old rapping a Jay-Z lyric and
Yes.
then getting drafted in the NHL and then saying, we're going to, not anymore. You're not going to play professional hockey
Yeah.
because, you rapped. And I think that might be a confluence of two different cases.
Yeah.
But the point is, pretty much the
No,
same.
and
It's pretty sure.
I've walked the walk. Like I've defended Trevor Noah and James Gunn and all sorts of people I disagree with over bad takes or whatever, old tweets. I don't think teenage tweets should ruin your life.
No.
I don't think likes should have ever been a thing that you had to pay a price for. I think offensive jokes are often pretty good. Like
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
don't want to get into that, but like there is a thing where living your life and broadcasting your life in the way that so many people do now and have this sort of personal brand, it becomes like it's rewarded to not have emotional regulation.
Yeah.
And
No, that's right. Yeah.
it concerns me when I
Yeah.
need to be around people who can't do the most basic emotional regulation in a time of crisis, and they've gone through all these steps to think the thing, to record it, to post it, and it makes me worried about interacting with those people, whether it's
Yeah.
in but particularly if they're in a position of public trust. Like I get concerned.
Yeah, I do too. And people who run businesses should be concerned that at Office Max or whatever, that someone says we're not going to
Office Depot, yeah.
depot. I don't want to. Did I defame the Max?
You did.
Max people, I apologize. I want some free copying privileges for apologizing and making sure that Mary Catherine caught my error. Office Depot, they wouldn't print an offensive sign. No, something that was a gathering for the celebration of Charlie Kirk's life.
Well, and also
And
we must note, Michael, that Pam Bondi has no say over Office Depot's
do,
policy.
do,
Also, like none of that, none of that.
Mary Catherine, did you see where I was going with this? This is a transition for the great producers out there who are usually next to me and in the studio, and I could yell at them, but I'm going to cross my fingers and tell my dear producers right now to play that clip of Pam Bondi, I believe, on a podcast that is hosted by Stephen Miller's wife. And as I have said multiple times throughout the day, she should have her podcast license revoked because talk about handling something in the worst possible way. This is Pam Bondi when asked about speech and how the AG should react to that.
businesses cannot discriminate. If you want to go in and print posters with Charlie's pictures on them for a vigil, you have to let them do that. We can prosecute you for that. I have Harmeet Dillon right now in our civil rights unit looking at that immediately, that Office Depot had done that. We're looking at that. But Sean, you know, they thought they could silence Charlie. All of this chatter, all of this hate, they couldn't silence Charlie. What they've done is they have created an army.
That is my bad. I set up the wrong one, but there's so much to pick from. If it was just one stupid comment, and then you're like, you know what, I got to walk that back. I don't know if we have the other clip. If not, I can do it a bit of justice by just saying that she does not believe that there is a distinction between speech and hate speech, and that the AG will be going after hate speech. Right. This is conservatism 101, guys.
Yeah.
And I know that this isn't a conservative administration, but let's pretend that there are a few people that are staffing it that have any idea that we are Americans. And I'm sorry to get all fucking Lee Greenwood on you here, but I am proud to be an American because at least we have a First Amendment that you don't have in Europe. And if you're mean to no specific trans person, but trans people, you can get off the plane as an Irish comedian and end up in handcuffs surrounded by 5 people with guns. We don't do that. We have, unfortunately, categories of hate crimes, which I'm also uncomfortable with, of prosecuting people for what's going through their head when they commit a crime of something that's already illegal. But nevertheless, Pam Bondi says that hate crimes are a thing. And I got to say, congratulations to everybody on the right on the internet today, because everyone was like, Pam Bondi, you're an idiot. I was pretty impressed.
I have a feeling, don't you think Harmeet Dillon was like, no.
Yeah, that's what we do. No, sorry.
Don't send that particular assignment over here. No, she said there's free speech and then there's hate speech. And Correct. We're all like, no, that's definitely incorrect. And this is a situation where there may be an eventuality where she does need to, and the DOJ does need to look into this Discord chat, whether there were people involved in planning this with the shooter, and she is hampering her ability to draw the distinction between speech and conspiracy by saying these stupid things. It's going to ruin her ability to, by the way, just like stop doing TV hits. I think that would be
correct. That's the other thing, is stop doing TV hits is always the best. Even though this is kind of our job, it's best to leave it to idiots like us to make
I got nothing to take here.
Yeah, like we don't have any control over the law. We just say dumb things, and then you yell at me in DMs. But I think that there is a danger here that people on the right might want to take a hard look at, is what happened after 9/11. And ultimately, people on the right were upset about it too in the long run, of the we just have to do something brigades. 9/11 happened. I understand the instinct. I was one of those people at the time too. I was panicked and paranoid. I was living in New York City. I thought the subways were going to blow up the next day. I thought we were going to get hit every week. What are we going to do? We create the Department of Homeland Security. We have FISA courts that are, just stamping everything that comes through. Do we want to do something like that now? Because what I saw today is I think it was Kash Patel saying, he was being asked, are you going to look at the people in the Discord? Yes, we look at everyone. You're going to look at all of them. Yes, we promise it. That's called an investigation. Of course they're going to do that. They're the FBI. You think they're not going to look through the people who are talking to this guy who committed a political assassination in broad daylight? Right. Of course they are. Get off TV and do the actual investigation. But the warning bit is, do not, under any circumstances, say we're going to break up these networks.
Right.
If you prove there's a network, break it up, put them in prison, put them in cuffs, and put them in front of a judge. What networks? What are you talking about? Don't do the thing because it makes people clap because they're upset about the murder of Charlie Kirk, as they should be, to say that, we have to do something. And now we're going to break up. We're going to say Antifa is a terrorist organization. Was this person a part of Antifa? Can you be a part of Antifa? Is it a self-declared thing? I don't know. I'm not an expert in Antifa, but I just know that there's a lot of performative bullshit happening right now.
Yeah, and Bondi, by the way, did try to walk this back by tweeting basically like
Ugh.
hate speech that turns into violence is
Yes,
and it's like, okay, well, yeah, that's a crime. We
it's
get
a crime.
if it's an actual threat, those are things you can do. So she's trying to walk it back, which like at least I appreciate that she isn't trying to do the things she said she was going to do. Okay, so like I appreciate the walk back, but both Bondi and Patel, people want somebody who is calm and
Yeah,
competent when something terrible is happening, particularly at the heads of these agencies. There is a desire in the Trump administration, I think, to just like prove it. Like, look, I'm just working my job so hard. Look how
yeah, yeah.
hard I'm working my job. And the way that you prove it is you go on morning television or you go on X and you post, right? And so I think there's a tendency to do too much of that. Whereas a Governor Cox, who actually was the voice of authority because he was relaying accurate
Yeah,
information and was doing it calmly and competently, he ends up being the person that people want to turn to.
yeah.
And so I wish there was more incentive for that.
Yeah. Well, I know, Mary Catherine, that you have a family who cares about you and demands you at a certain hour. So I want to get to some viewers, listeners who have hands up and want to berate you and bully you and hit you with some hate speech. And if Jen in Oklahoma hits you with hate speech, I'm going to send Pam Bondi to her house. Jen, are you going to be nice here? Where is Jen?
I have exactly the opposite. So
Good.
my elderly mother, who is now deceased, when she kind of lost her mobility, and so she was kind of a captive of her living room. And so Fox News, not just Fox News, the whole channel of Fox News, they were the people invited into her living room every day as company.
Mhm.
The early days, Mary Katherine, when you were on Fox, you were her favorite.
Oh, that's so
Oh,
sweet.
really?
Her granddaughter was getting a journalism degree at Hillsdale at the time, and she wanted her to be you.
Oh, that's so
Wow.
kind.
Anyway, a reminder to a lot of you all out there that there are people for whom you are their company. You are their link to the world. So
Jen, I want to say that that's not true for me at all, but it is true of Mary Catherine. And I'll give you an example of this. I told Mary Catherine, I texted her when I was at Christmas 2 summers ago, and my cousin was like, I love that Mary Katherine Ham. And I'm like, oh, she's an old pal of mine. And she was like, what? You know Mary Katherine Ham? And I'm like, calm down. I'm awesome. And I guess I'm your boring cousin, but I had to text Mary Catherine because her fan base knows no borders, Jen. They love her. So, and I think she's right. I think they're right, but that's why she's on the show today. So
I do have a comment, but I
sure.
had to tell her that first. So I've over the last several days, I've listened to a lot of voices,
Mhm.
and some have been uplifting and some have been quite the opposite. But the most compelling voice I've heard was last night. I listened to Russell Brand's podcast.
Oh, interesting.
Very interesting because he had reacted to a band there in Britain. I'm too old to know the bands and stuff like that. But, that in the middle of this performance, the lead singer had gotten up and said all these hateful things and celebrated Charlie's death. And, he was shocked by that. And then he said he remembered that the guy in, his prior to being the lead singer on a band, he was an actor. So he said, well, this is just performative. And he said, then it caused him to remember that on September 12th, the day after 9/11, he went to work at MTV dressed as Osama bin Laden.
Oh, wow.
He said,
That's interesting.
he talked about his early, his 20s and 30s. He said, I was outrageous. I lived to be outrageous. I was a provocateur, and so his introspection on this podcast of what made him in those early years of his life, just sort of lived to rub everybody the wrong way,
Yeah, for sure.
and all of that. And then thinking about all these young people and how they're reacting. It was a really fascinating podcast. I highly recommend it for people to go out there and listen to it, because there are a lot of people who wouldn't really be that honest about who they used to be. And
Yeah, no, I mean, Russell Brandgen has obviously had a number of transformations. When
yeah,
I denounced him in the pages of the Daily
yeah,
Beast, he was a different person then. I don't know. I don't
yeah,
pay much attention to him now. But before I kick this to Mary Catherine, who has, made some, has written about this too recently, about, grace in moments like this. I think this is actually an important point, because what I have tried to focus on recently is the reaction from the commentariat, university professors, people who are in positions of power and mean things, and the things they say supposedly mean things, and they have some sort of moral weight, in how they respond to this stuff, and not necessarily what they are saying themselves. Because as you point out, I think that, as I said earlier in the show, is that if someone was digging up things that I said when I was 18, I guarantee you, I'd say, yeah, I don't believe that anymore. That was really dumb of me. I was working out these ideas. But when I saw the video from the Luigi Mangione trial today, when I saw these people cheering and very awkwardly high-fiving people, it actually meant a lot to me. When you see them, they couldn't make contact. I was
Yeah.
like, oh, there's a lot, there's a lot happening there.
Something
And I
going
see how like they all look very damaged. And they're very performative in the way they dress. Like, look at me. They have, parent issues, I'm sure, et cetera. And I'll let them work through those things. And, the thing about the list of people that I named who are left-wing terrorists who went later on to universities, almost none of them disavowed what they did. There were a couple that did. And I purposely didn't include them in that. But we have to allow people to make these mistakes. And I think that's to what Mary Catherine was saying about, making sure that, somebody who's a stock boy at the Piggly Wiggly never works again. I don't have a great feeling about that. But what about you, MKH?
Yeah, I think it's tricky. I do get worried, and I hate to be an old fuddy-duddy about it, but I do get worried that in a way that it wasn't for Russell Brand, in your sort of shock jock
Yeah,
moments as a young person, that now social media reinforces that and gives you a metric where you are rewarded
correct.
for that kind of behavior. So I think that can be an issue. I also wanted to say that I think for those who are thought leaders and who are their words are supposed to mean things, I do think there has been an almost total absence of people going above and beyond to assure people like Charlie Kirk and people who like Charlie Kirk that they should be welcomed and that they will actively welcome them. Which, if it were the other way around, I'd be like, what do we need to do to make sure that we can have you on campus and I can
Yeah,
host you and make you feel good about it? I think
yeah.
Ezra Klein has gone an extra step.
Ezra Klein is top of my list, and he's
Yeah,
also doubled down by revisiting this controversial column that he wrote, saying that this is how you do it. This is
yeah,
how you debate, and everyone went after him. He doubled down. Actually, had Ben Shapiro on the show and had a conversation. I haven't listened to it yet, but this is the point about 20-year-old Charlie Kirk said something bad. He was
right,
assassinated at 31. My impressions of Ezra Klein that were always negative was when I knew of him and interacted a few
right.
times with him when he was in his early 20s, and
Mhm.
the man has grown, and he's been quite impressive. I still disagree with him on almost everything, but I
Well,
think
like
he's an honest broker.
the opposite of this, by the way, is the New York Times hosting or giving Hassan Piker an op-ed to debate with Charlie, who is no longer able to debate. And if I were in Piker's shoes, I'd be like, this person has been robbed of his voice. Let him take that space, basically. Like that, I do think, and colleges and high schools need to be saying, how can we help you
Yeah.
start clubs? How can we help you be safe? How can we pay for your security? Because once somebody's murdered for their thoughts, like you need to be doing an extra thing to
Yeah.
make sure that people can engage in this.
Yeah, and look, I think it's important to realize the humanity of everybody who you disagree with. Hassan Piker, I dislike the things that he says constantly.
Yeah.
I think he's a troll. I think he's this, that, and the other. But I can understand his when he tries to make a serious point where he's coming from. I understand it. I disagree with it. I don't
Well,
think
and
it's
importantly,
so far to the pale. Yeah.
we wouldn't dream of if he were, I'd be at a rally for him if he were murdered.
1000%.
The exact opposite of what
Yeah.
I've seen from some quarters.
And look, I mean, I don't know if we do a good job of modeling it on this show. We've tried, and I've had a number of lefties on, probably almost an even split of even Marxists. I mean, this the guy Brace Belden from the TrueAnon podcast, one of my favorite episodes. What an absolutely lovely guy. In good Lord Brace, is it possible for you to be wrong about more things? But what a lovely person, and it was a fun episode, and I enjoyed it. But thank you, Jen. I know you got a hustle soon. But let me get Gabby in here. How's it going, Gabby?
Hey, Michael. It's going good. How you doing? Mary Katherine, big fan of yours as well, of course, Michael. You mentioned the terrorists on campus, that they went to the campus after their sort of reign of terror, but weren't they also radicalized on campus? I wonder more broadly if we appreciate, if you think, you two, either one or both of you, I wonder if you think we appreciate enough how much something like this terrible murder, and also, obviously the Tentifada, but how much our crisis as a society that we're focused on tonight stems from the campus. I screened Ari Aster's Eddington last night for a class of students, and they responded well to their credit, and I had to explain to them who Angela Davis was when the worst influencer is holding women, race, and class. My former colleague at UC Santa Cruz, by the way, for a number of years, way back when she had the office next to mine. But I will not make this about me. What do you think about my convoluted but crystal clear question? Can we appreciate enough the role of the campus here, and that something has to be done if we're going to take this seriously? We talk about free speech law, and people want to talk about hate speech, and that's wrong, as you said. This happened on a college campus. Isn't the college campus more of an issue in regards to the Charlie Kirk murder than people are acknowledging? And don't we need to think more deeply about it? Or what do you think?
Mary Katherine, what do you think? I agree
I
with
think
you.
actually college professors need to have some introspection on this, because, like I said, once someone has been murdered on a campus for having a debate, people are going to be scared to have debates. Now, I think that by trying to silence Charlie Kirk and those who agreed with him, probably this murderer has done the opposite, and many of these young people will become much more Charlie Kirk-like in their ability to debate and their desire to debate. But professors are leaders on campus, administrators are leaders on campus, and they have failed students by not drawing lines between violence and speech, by conflating violence and speech, by telling them that they shouldn't hear anything that ever offends them, which then made them weaker and weaker. It's like a vicious cycle, right? Because then when you hear things that you disagree with and you haven't, you go, oh my gosh, this does hurt. I don't like that. You have to practice these things. And so when I go on college campuses, even though I'm right of center and I know every single one of these young people has no trouble disagreeing with me, I invite them to disagree with me. I'm like, it doesn't bother me, won't affect you, happy to have it out. And I do that because I'm in a position of power. And that so seldom happens from liberal professors, and it needs to happen so much more. But I'm not sure that they are dedicated. I don't think they're dedicated, many of them, to the idea that those exchanges should happen. I think they're dedicated to building that mind fortress where they're the good guys all the time.
And Gabby, I would add that there was here at City University in New York, and I think it was probably 2012, 13, 14, that they got rid of the name of a community center that I think the students gave it, or maybe a professor or something. And it was the Guillermo Morales Asada Shakur Community Center, both of whom escaped terrorism and murder charges and ended up in Cuba. But the FALN, the Puerto Rican terrorist organization that Morales was a leader of, and the Francis Tavern bombing that killed innocent people. And there's a son of one of the people who killed there who speaks out often about this stuff. To have those kind of accoutrements of murder all around you, posters of Layla Khalid and things like that, what does that do but tell you that if you have the correct ideas, murdering innocents is, as long as the goal is correct, the ends justify the means. So I think that I can't think of any other place. It's not happening at Goldman Sachs or something. I mean,
Right.
the organizations that put that foot forward and just say shrug to this idea and these kind of make-believe revolutionaries that are at Ivy League, every university actually at this point. But thank you, Gabby. I'm going to try to race through to get Brian in here. Brian, thanks for being patient. How's it going, buddy?
Where's Brian?
There's Brian. Is there Brian? There's Brian. Oh, he's muted. Can we?
There you go, Brian.
Yeah, unmuted. Hey, Brian. How's it going, buddy?
Am I here? Okay.
Yeah, you're here.
Awesome. I feel like the eternal optimist. I know it's been a week for reflection and mourning, and we all respect that from wherever we are on the political spectrum, I hope. But I'm just curious, given the dialogue, given some of the dread over the current state of social media algorithms or lack of political will or institutions like the media and education, what are your thoughts on a path forward? Do you see it, or where do you think it might come from?
Yeah, I wish I had
what do we have?
I wish I had a specific and detailed answer for you. I do think there is something to the idea that someone told me at an event last night that he thought of Charlie Kirk. He was my age. He thought of Charlie Kirk as a political animal, and that his daughters, who are teens, thought of him as a faith leader.
Yeah.
And that's very interesting to me. And I think he emphasized that message far more than I realized, because again, I'm not in the demo for his clips, right? I would work with Turning Point occasionally, but I'm not in the demo. I've aged out, and I didn't realize how much he had emphasized that. And I do think there's something real happening where a lot of the people who were connected to him deeply, this is the upside of social media, is that Michael and I can have this conversation and a bunch of people can join in, and it's like talking to friends every day, right? They did that with Charlie. They did that with this content. On college campuses, if you meet young people who feel ostracized on campus and suddenly they feel like they can talk to somebody honestly about it, it's very powerful for them. And I think many of them were probably positively influenced by the way he lived his life. And I got to say, I think the New York Times profiled him recently, and everybody's looking for dirt. And the only dirt they're finding are debate points, because he lived the life that he said he was living. And I think that will matter to those young people as they move forward and mourn him.
Yeah, I mean, Brian, I agree. And one of the things that I've been thinking a lot about is Jonathan Haidt, the great Jonathan Haidt from NYU, who wrote The Coddling of the American Mind with the previously named Greg Lukianoff. We talked about him tonight. And by the way, on the fifth column this week, maybe a little tip, if you're actually here and you're paying attention, Greg Lukianoff on Thursday, maybe. Is that right? It is right. So Greg will be on talking about speech issues. But Jonathan Haidt has written a book that was another bestseller about phones, and I'm concerned about that. I have a daughter who just started high school. Can you believe that, MKH? Just started high school this week. It's nuts. And who texted me about Charlie Kirk too, by the way. And as I said to Megyn Kelly today, I think the purest response was from my daughter, who's not politicized. And her response was, he has 2 kids. She was like, without a dad taken in that way, really horrified her. So I was like, oh, there's something, I think I did a decent job with her, an okay job with her, or mom basically did. But as far as this stuff about, the other thing I was thinking about is going back, and I found a couple of examples of this. If you look at the first issue of National Review published after the assassination of John F. Kennedy, you can actually find this online on archive.org. There's a collection of quotes of people saying, this right-wing environment of hate. And this was a very famous thing. And it actually persists to this day that the killer of John F. Kennedy was a left-wing defector to the Soviet Union who was handing out pamphlets of the Fair Play for Cuba Committee and tried to previously kill General Walker of the John Birch Society. Yeah. And it was the exact same thing that you see. There was all the Groyper stuff, exact same thing. And you can find so many of these parallels in previous examples of political violence. And I think, I've been shitting on social media too. And I think it is so many bad incentives in it and the rest of it. But had I had access to social media when I was in college, I probably wouldn't have felt so politically alone. And that's a great thing for people who get to have Mary Katherine come to campus and know about it because people are talking about it on message boards or on Discord or on whatever it might be, or tweeting about it. And, you know, sometimes there were guests that came and you didn't even know, and you were like, oh, because they didn't advertise the bad ones. And the bad ones, by the way, were always debated too. They were never left on their own. They didn't just get their own thing. That'd be debated.
Yeah.
But I think that that's the positive thing about social media is most people are normal. And most people find, you know, great companionship and good debate. And there's been people that have changed my mind because they've sent me things on social media that I was unaware of. And they said, oh, but you didn't see this. Having that makes me a clearer thinker, a sharper thinker, and a more honest thinker when somebody will send me something that says, remember that thing that you said? Totally wrong. And I always try to correct it if I've said it in a previous episode of whatever show. I say, oh, you know, I said this last week. Somebody, not an argumentative point, says, well, you're wrong because you're a jerk about this and you don't emphasize X or Y or Z, but a factual matter or kind of broadening a point because there's something that I missed. And Brian, I'm a huge fan of the positive thinking. I don't understand all these anti-capitalists going crazy. I'm like, oh, things are so much better than they've ever been. There are fewer people in poverty. It's like, I'm excited about stuff like that. And I'm a dork about it. And I should apply that a little more often because I think that it's an understandable reaction to this bit of brutality that we will be exceptionally negative and say, how did this happen? Let's try to not allow it to happen again. But censoring people, trying to corral their speech is not the thing that is going to do it. And I think that probably everyone here, you guys in the audience here and Mary Katherine could agree to that, particularly because she wrote a book about it. So you should go back and buy it, by the way. Let's make it a bestseller 10 years later. Okay. Is there a copy back there?
Yeah, there, a little copy.
Let's see the cover. So
there we go.
There we go. End of discussion.
End of discussion.
And
it's a pretty fun read.
It's a fun read. I've read it. And if you guys can somehow manage it so Guy Benson doesn't get any of the money, he's like a fancy guy now.
We'll cut him out.
Huge Fox News guy. But apparently I yelled at people today and said, Mary Katherine Ham is not a Fox. I started the show by acknowledging that mistake because I was like, that was really an asshole move of me. Because I was like, you got it wrong. And it wasn't wrong. You were actually, I just don't pay attention to you anymore, Mary Katherine, because I'm a bad friend.
It's fine. It's fine.
But we've been friends for a long time.
You're not canceled. It's all good.
No, we're not canceled. And I greatly appreciate you coming. Jeremy, David, Aaron, the three of you. I'm so sorry because Mary Katherine has so many responsibilities. Aaron, I don't feel as bad.
Go pick up these children. I'm a chauffeur in the evening.
You're a chauffeur, but you missed Aaron because he's one of the smartest guys. He comes on. He's just like, you're wrong about everything. And I said we have to give him a show. But next time, we'll get back to developing Aaron's show, and you guys come back and we'll answer all the questions. Thank you so much to Mary Katherine Ham.
I appreciate it, guys. Have a good night.
Podcasts, see her on Fox News. The rest of you, come back. We're here again on Thursday with a show that, I won't reveal it. I'll just keep you guessing, but it's going to be a very, very good one. And we'll be live again on Thursday night at 7:00. Go over to YouTube, The Moynihan Report, at The Moynihan Report. I think you did that. It just comes up. And subscribe. It's Colby Hall. This is the producer just texted. I didn't want to tell people it was Colby Hall, producer. It was a mystery. It's no longer a mystery. It's Colby Hall from Mediaite, the founding editor of Mediaite. Really interesting guy. But that's at 7:00 on Thursday. Go subscribe. Watch the old episodes. And, just make me happy. And we will see you on Thursday. Bye.